So we've got a team here, which is Nathan, who's our lead developer on the 2D20 system. Sam, who's head of the role-playing team, then Modiphius. John, who is line editor on Achtung, Cthulhu, and oversees all the storyline. And Ben, who is our systems rules editor and guru. So, and then we might have someone else popping in as well, who's working with us too. So let's start. So we all love, I think, coming up with rule systems, if you like. A bit of games design. You spend those idle moments on the tube, doodling. How many dice could I make a game system out of? What would be fun to roll? Can I use cards? Tablets, iPhones, all kinds of stuff. You know, part of the fun of games design is just coming up with endless ideas, and I've probably got 20 different systems that I've devised over various assorted notebooks. And so when we first started, it was literally me and my wife Rita in a basement flat doing it with what we thought was just for a bit of fun on the side of my t-shirt company. And of course I wanted to come up with a game system, and I was actually coming up with a game system at the time. But I also thought, well, actually let's got to think really commercially about this. And at the time we were looking to do a Kickstarter. And I was also looking at what was big at the time in World War II and Cthulhu. You know, in terms of our first project, it was a bit of a no-brainer because Cthulhu projects are very big, World War II projects are very big. Then I thought, but if it's my own rule system, maybe it won't be very big. So we went to not one, but two rule systems that made sense. Call of Cthulhu. It's a bit of a no-brainer, right, if you're doing a Cthulhu game. And then Savage Worlds, because we wanted to be the other end of the system for the people who wanted full-blown kind of pulp action. Both big selling game systems. We didn't have to write a rule book, so we needed less artwork, we needed less rules writing, less editing, less layout. It meant we could get a product out really quick. I mean, actually our first product was just an adventure, the Three Kings adventure that Sarah Newton wrote. And so we had 2 adventure books out first before we even had a core book, because they just utilised the base books for Savage Worlds of Call of Cthulhu. I think we had to write a madness rule for... Actually, hold on, I'll take my radio off before I get disturbed. Yeah, so basically it helped. Using an existing rule system helped us get out there quickly. And then when we came to do the Kickstarter, we obviously then used those both again. We dual statted the books, so you only had to buy one book, so again appealed to the most possible people. So we had 4 winning ticks in the boxes. We had Call of Cthulhu, Savage Worlds, World War II and Cthulhu. So and that I think really helped us get going at the beginning. And then obviously that did well for us, but then we picked up the license for Mutant Chronicles, and I thought, now's the time for my system. And but actually then we started talking about ideas, and Ben was involved.
I came in now for point 1 and 2.
Yes. So and there's Mikhail Cross, who's our lead designer, graphic designer, layout artist, who's also a bedroom games designer as well. He's had a couple of games out as well. And so we were bouncing around ideas for what would be fun, and you know, maybe it should use D20. And I remember being in France on holiday, doing a test scene with 5 D20, which was actually really good fun, but completely crazy. I mean, I was doing this really high-level game, and thinking, this is amazing, and then we were talking it through with everyone, and we realised that the maths were completely off, and you know, it was too wrong. So I'm gonna just hand over to Ben just to comment on those early days. So we're just going to talk through about how that developed.
So it really started with a conversation between 2 points. One point where you wanted a game where you weren't having to do a lot of in the moment math. You know, you wanted to roll dice, get a result, and have it worked out. But there were 2 ways forward. And so 2D20 is basically a combination of these 2 approaches. One where you'd have multiple successes, you know, you'd have a big dice pool, so it'd give you multiple successes. And one where you'd have a limited amount of dice, so you'd only have to look at a few dice. And what we did to make it different was we had 2 tiers of success on a single dice. So you could get 1 success or 2 successes on a single dice, and that sped things up quite nicely. And for Mutant Chronicles, it meant that when you're sitting people down at a table, instead of the big problem you have with dice pool games is everyone's got about 50 million dice on the table and tracking who's the who's and what's what. When you've only got a maximum of 5 dice, and you're usually rolling 2 dice, it's nice and self-contained. You've got all the room in the world to play, and there's not a lot of grief in doing it. So place testing it was very easy. It was quite fun to do because when you roll a crit, everyone's happy, everyone loves when that happens. And by having a crit built into the dice mechanic, which is the multiple success tier, people really got behind it. And there were a few niggles about Savage Worlds.
Yeah. So, and right at the early stage, we were bouncing around all these ideas and kind of gradually getting a concept together. But even then, I thought we're still not good enough. So, we were still a little fledgling business, bunch of writers, creators, and so I thought again. We've been doing, a good example, we were doing Thunderbirds board game around the same time, and I wanted to do a co-op game, so I thought, you've got to go to the top, so that was Matt Leacock, and managed to get him on board. And so at the same time I thought, Star Wars had been out and was literally #1 for like a whole year in the charts, and so we went to Jay Little, who was the lead designer on that, and pitched him the idea, look, we've got this concept, really need a safe pair of hands to help us take these great ideas and make it a really fantastic idea that gives us a foundation to build a lot more games on it. Because I was thinking ahead, and this is a bucket load of work. This is like 2 years of design meetings and writing and more design meetings, and we had about 1,000 people playtesting Mutant Chronicles at the beginning, I think, and we've got Nathan on board as well, which I'll introduce you to as well. So it's I was thinking, I'm not just doing this for Mutant Chronicles, this needs to make sense for a lot of games going ahead. So we got Jay on board, who kind of took our kind of creative pool of ideas off and went and gave it a structure, tore out some stuff, added some stuff in, and came back with a proper professional working system. So that really made sense. It was it's not cheap. The whole development process isn't cheap, but it definitely helped give us something much more solid. And then Nathan got involved to help us take that on.
Well, sort of. I was brought in to freelance and just do some background for one of the source books for Mutant Chronicles and for the chapter of the core book, and came in and started game designing because that's where my instincts are anyway, and ended up taking on more and more work throughout the process and becoming more and more involved, and until the point where I was doing the rules for all the supplements lined up ahead as well. It was interesting watching the system go from it was the 0.5 alpha to the finished system with all these contributions from so many different sources and so many different designers who'd all had inspirations from different places, and it's kind of almost ended up as the culmination of several people's ideas inspired by several other ideas and things they'd liked and things they'd seen and thought, oh, that was interesting from other places. And even then, there are still things that, personally speaking, I would have wanted like an extra 6 weeks to refine down and refine further. And little did I know at that point that it was going to be an ongoing system, and I'd get that chance going forward.
So I suppose, and what we didn't do is just a copy paste of our, that gaming system, because it doesn't work. You've got to really think about how you change an engine for a different world. So, that is looking at the numbers of attributes, the names of the attributes. It's not just the fact that the threat points are heat points in Infinity. It's there's all sorts of custom tweaks that we do to actually tailor the game. Also, Sam, you could talk about how it's changed a bit overall.
I think I can.
So, but just kind of more from a top line, how Star Trek's different to John Carter.
Sure. I'm looking sceptical because I came in quite late to 2D20, as it were. My first game that I worked on was Star Trek Adventures, which is obviously a kind of a bit of a departure from the complexity of Infinity or the kind of brutality of Conan, I guess. But because Star Trek specifically is so centered on that kind of science-led discovery, exploration, we're not going to be focusing too much on the combat system, for example, because we don't want to plant a flag in that and say this is the default mode of play. That would be maybe a Klingon game, for example, where actually the combat would be a lot more detailed, nuanced, and that would be the kind of, as I say, the main mode of play and the most amount of time you spend in your session doing that. But there were cool little things that were that were introduced with Star Trek Adventures that would help you on your kind of scientific journey with some of the extended task system, whereby actually problems have stress that you have to get through, and it involves amount of work and amount of breakthroughs, and those breakthroughs then reveal more about the problem that you've got at hand. And it's those kind of subsystems or the other layers that you add on top that really define the experience. Nathan, I know that a lot of the time we talk about how more than just kind of necessarily just the setting or the IP and the actual kind of fluff that's in the book, but it's the rules themselves that inform how you play and inform the experience going forward. I'm trying to segue over to you.
Yeah. And maybe you could also talk about, because John Carter is quite different to the system.
You keep handing the mic to the wrong people, because I've not touched John Carter, but I've been there through everything else.
Yeah. You can talk about John Carter.
Yes.
And with what, carrying on from what Sam was saying, it's equal parts making sure the rules produce the right outcomes for what you're putting into it. You want your players to make choices on behalf of their characters, and you want the outcomes of those choices to feel like they're from that setting. And that sometimes can take a lot of work to get the rules to do that. Sometimes it can take nothing more than just emphasizing a rule that's always been there in other versions that wasn't necessarily as prominent. One big example, I think, is the obtain information option that's in Star Trek Adventures. It's in Conan and Infinity as well. Spending momentum, ask the GM a question, get more info. Very player-driven information gathering. But it's so much more central to Star Trek with that focus on discovery and that focus on finding the solution to a problem than it is in Infinity, than it is in Conan, in spite of the fact that the same rule is present in all three of them. Emphasis can make a big impact in that regard.
At the moment we've got Mutant Chronicles, Infinity, Conan, John Carter, Achtung, Cthulhu coming, more to come, more to be announced. Pretty much every version of the system, you take your attribute or stat and a skill and add them together, whereas Star Trek, we reduce the skills down to disciplines, the broader areas. And then, Ben, do you want to talk a bit about John Carter? Because that's actually quite a big move on.
Well, John Carter's a bit of a departure, because one of the problems I have when I'm running a game is I don't want to look at about 100 pages of rules. What I want is I want to look at a character sheet, see what's on the character sheet and go, right, that's what's important to that character. Right, that's what's important to that character. So John Carter doesn't have skills. Everyone's universally competent based on their attributes. And it's a pair of attributes rather than a skill and a stat. So if you're trying to inspire people, your passion and your empathy are what are going to come to the fore. If you're trying to fight someone with a sword, your cunning and your daring, these are the things that come out. So by eschewing the normal skill plus stat target number and building talents around what people actually wanted their characters to do, you wound up with a character who could say, I'm a Martian swordsman. When I hit you with a sword, it does 4 times the damage of anyone else hitting you with a sword. You're going to know about it, and I'm taking 3 of your friends with you. It became a game where the character sheet dominated play. And rather than needing to reference individual talents that were already existent in the book, because the player was deciding what they wanted to be important, then the book could sit to one side. It told you how to play the game, but once you knew how to play the game, you may need never look at it again. You know, just when you've given out some XP and someone's going, what can I do to this talent now to make it even more awesome? So, whereas in Infinity, which is my other hat, where you have about 1 million points of crunch because we bring all of the IP in and we give people as many options as possible. John Carter looks at the books and goes, you've got this guy from 18th century Earth, finds himself on Mars, never seen a car, let alone a flyer. 5 minutes later he's flying around on a flyer. 10 minutes later he's dealing with alien races he's never seen before. You don't want to put barriers in front of play. You just want people to get on with it. And so it really was a bit of a departure from what had been done prior, and it was written around about the same time as Conan. So the 2D20 variant it was spinning off of was actually Mutant Chronicles, rather than what had happened later with Star Trek. So you see these games coming through, and they've all got lessons learned from previous iterations. And the big lesson, which is one that Nathan always goes on with, is that you've got to have the system produce the world. You can't have it as a bolt-on extra.
And then obviously we've got new projects coming. There's at least 2 we can't talk about yet that are going to be announced in the new year, maybe 3. The one big one that people may know about is June, which is coming in the future. It's an enormous project that we're working with Battlefront on, who are the master licensee, and that's going to be a 2D20 game, and we're trying to bring in a lot of new ideas. I'm a big believer in. I come from, my first role-playing game was a basic D&D blue book, which was pretty thin, pretty small, but it was pretty easy to get people into play. Doesn't mean it's going to be a small book, but I'm a big believer in trying to break down those barriers that stop people playing the game as soon as they open the box, rather than saying, sorry guys, I need to read the rule book for 2 hours, come back when you've been finished your dinner. So we're experimenting with lots of things there, where it gives us the opportunity to do something quite intense and amazing, because it's a different world, isn't it? This isn't a world where you run around shooting blasters at people. It's personal duels. It's if you have an energy gun, it's incredibly powerful. It's much more about politics and conspiracies, and
I think it's one of the first IPs where we're going to be dealing with. We're actually going to be dealing with more of the intrigue and political game than anything else. I think it's a little bit of Infinity, isn't there?
Yeah, we have some good solid rules on Mick and Noah.
Yeah. But coming from one of my favourite games from Green Ronin, Song of Ice and Fire, where they have intrigue as almost comparable to combat. You've got kind of intrigue manoeuvres and like different tests you can do. I'm really interested to see what we can do with that, because I think that's going to be probably a lot of the forefront when you think of the Bene Gesserit and those kind of abilities they have. That's going to be something I think that we're really going to have to get right.
It's something that we want to make stand out and feel special.
That's right, yeah. Because that is the nature of the setting.
It's not just being it's not just having a really good skill in something. It's almost something transcendent.
Yeah. And we've also got to think about the rule system again, that it's going to bring in a new audience. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a vast swathe of Dune fans that maybe haven't played a role-playing game before. Maybe people played D&D when they were younger, who this might be the reason they come back. So, we're always thinking about the audience. There's another game we're working on that is in a similar vein, very much not so much about combat, more about high society events. Not giving too much away.
Even with that, what I think we can say, and what I will say, rather than revealing the IP, is that, again, following on from the kind of John Carter experience, we're moving and again departing away and working on what we are calling the momentum system, which is a lot more kind of synthesized, narrative-led, kind of slightly mechanical, reduced version that's streamlined, quick to pick up, easy to play, and again has more of that kind of attribute and approach version. whereby you're going, well, I'm, the kind of default, I think, probably example you always kind of give is, I'm being stealthy as my approach. You could either be trying to assassinate someone, so that's like fighting as like an attribute maybe, or I'm trying to defuse a bomb quietly. But the approach lets you freely pick what other attributes you're going to use. I think that's always been a key part to D20 anyway.
Yeah, and especially once we've disconnected stat and skills from particular stats, which you want them connected when you've got a big skill list. But when you start cutting down the skill list, you can start disconnecting them, and suddenly you've now got 6 different ways to use your fighting skill, because it might represent your knowledge of combat as much as your ability at it. And it's something that we do in Star Trek now. It's something that we pushed forward with Achtung, Cthulhu, where you've got that greater versatility of what each skill represents, and it's something that we've pushed forward in this as yet unrevealed IP.
Yeah, and I mean, Achtung, Cthulhu is a good example because it comes around full circle back to our first baby that was so important, and we're just literally launching the 7th edition version of Achtung, Cthulhu. It's all been restatted later this week, but as we've announced before, there's a 2D20 version coming, which is essentially a core book. So it's nice to be able to sell a core book of ourselves. It's nice to be able to follow on and build on our world. So it's the books. The 2D20 version is going to have a lot more content in it, a lot more plot, a lot more secrets, a lot more about our kind of the secret war, and is going to really again build on the system. John, do you want to briefly say?
Yeah,
anything?
sure. I think 2D20 is quite a new system to me. I'm more a narrative person than a rules person, so actually using that has been really interesting. And I think the thing I like about the system is that it does feel quite narrative in a lot of ways, and you can create some very interesting things narratively with it. It's not just crunch. I mean, there is enough crunch to kind of keep people happy, but I think it kind of shows the flexibility of the system, that it can be, developed for Achtung, Cthulhu, for Dune, for Conan, for all very different types of games. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming, and we're hopefully homing in on the last leg of the first draft, aren't we, at the moment?
Yeah.
So hopefully that won't be too long, and I think we might. I mean, we've debuted it for the first time here, and people seem to be having some fun, which is always good. I think we'll probably have a quick start before too long for people to actually just give it a try themselves. So it's always interesting. Every play session with different people, you learn something more. I've done a couple this morning, and it's already kind of thoughts are whirring about how to refine, improve, iterate. I think that's the great thing about 2D20 as well, is the more we do, the more we iterate, the more fun it becomes, really.
Yeah. I mean, and the good thing is, because we did that painful work with the maths early on, it's nice that everyone who's involved in doing a version knows that there's a solid foundation there. We play test the new bits, but we don't have to go back and play test whether 2D20 works, because we know that bit works. And that core always stays the same, but how you get the target number can change. Lots of things around it. It's almost like a big toolkit, really, isn't it? That we just go, well, what will be fun for this world? What helps that world come to life for the player? Because that's what's more important, as long as there's that foundation. So the next thing that we're doing is we're also opening this up, because we can't keep it to ourselves, which would be a shame. In the best traditions, we're opening it up as a licensing program that other companies can come to us and go, hey, we want to make a game using 2D20. So there's, I think, 4 groups that we're in talks with at the moment, and one here, Mark, if you want to come over and say hello, from Red Scar, who are one of our first licensees to use the system. Is it him? Do you want to tell them what you're up to?
So I'm Mark from Red Scar, but I kind of officially work for Modiphius in the background on Mutant, Chronicles and Infinity, and had a little bit of a play with Conan at one point. So I think the whole team have kind of nailed it with the flexibility of the system, that you can tailor the whole system to the setting. which is one of the things we're doing through Red Scar at the moment on the Devil's Run role-playing game, which is a post-apocalyptic essentially Mad Max setting in North America. So we're going heavily into vehicular combat, working quite closely with Benn for approval system. And again, we're managing to tailor certain elements of that system into how we want it to work with the post-apocalypse Mad Max, and elements of kind of scavenging and resources and the search that you might have on to just survive in that post-apocalypse, which is a really fun part. The system is that you can flex it to, you know, what you're trying to achieve with the setting, essentially.
Yeah, cool.
And like I say, it's really great to be working as part of that license for it to be opened up, so other people can help tailor those areas to where they want it to work, really.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, Mark's one of the first people that we've signed up, and what we're doing is letting people do core books, because I'm a big believer. I mean, you can see good examples of Fantasy Flight Games. Generally, every release is a core book. Core books sell 5 times more than a supplement ever will. So commercially, it's much better for people to be able to sell core books, so the deal allows you to do that. And our team, the rules team, will help guide them through the process. There's an SRD that is that's been created to help people, but we go beyond that. We actually help them, advise them on what they can change and ideas they could have to make it more suitable for their world. And then the plan is to open that up more and more and more, and get a lot more people involved in creating games using 2D20 as we develop it ourselves.